Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 2021 meeting of the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado. Hang on, my computer's acting funny. My name is Julie Beller, and I am the chair for the board of directors of this task force. I am so glad that you've chosen to join us this evening. Thanks for taking a bit of time out of your week to gather virtually with us and other like-minded citizens who are focused on the goal of seeing an end to human trafficking. We know that human trafficking is a crime that involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. It is the abuse of people for the profit of the trafficker. I need to let you know of a few housekeeping items just in case you're new to our meetings. So first, we always ask that you stay muted in our meetings. It just helps us keep the meeting moving along smoothly. We do, however, encourage you to use the chat function throughout the meeting. Please connect with each other. Check out the names of the organizations that are represented here. Reach out, share with us if this is your first time joining us, and just make that good connection. We're here to be a networking community so that we can fight this crime more effectively. Second, if you have questions for our speaker later on, please send a private message to the host, who will keep track of all of those, and then we'll have Wendy Smith present them to our speaker once the presentation is finished. So again, private message your questions to the host. Please start that message with the word question so that she can track all of those and have them ready for us when the speaker is finished with his presentation. This task force is a grassroots, all volunteer-based organization. We are guided by a board of directors. We are not politically affiliated, nor are we a religiously based organization. We believe that human trafficking is a human rights issue, an issue that should be addressed by all political parties and people of all beliefs and all backgrounds. I honestly thought that by this month we would be meeting in person again, but our regular venue, First United Methodist, is not quite ready to have us back. I am the first person they are going to call when they will allow meetings larger than 10 on Tuesday evenings. But at this point, or when I called them last, they just weren't ready for that yet. But as soon as we do get the go ahead from them, I will let you know. And maybe in the next 1 or 2 months, we will be back together in person. And we hope to also figure out how to live stream that as well, so that those of you who can't join us in person, maybe your work schedule makes it more difficult, you can stay with us because we really enjoy having you with us. Our vision for this task force is to end modern-day slavery in Southern Colorado. Our mission is to be involved in preventing labor and sex trafficking through awareness and advocacy, intervening in the human trafficking cycle through collaboration with individuals, agencies, and organizations, and connecting those impacted by modern-day slavery to restorative services. What do? We host monthly meetings like this one, and hopefully we will be back in person soon. We do community presentations. If you are interested in having human trafficking, or an HT 101 as we call it, please reach out to us either through our website or the email address info@ht-colorado.org, and we would love to help you organize a presentation for a small group, a large group, it doesn't really matter, just reach out to us. We do host an annual symposium. Our hope is to have an in-person event this year, somewhere around October 23rd. So be looking for more information for that. We'll keep you posted. We also have historically done Advocacy Day at the Capitol. The last few years, we've had a bit of a struggle getting that organized, but that is something that we are passionate about, connecting citizens with legislators and knowing the current legislation that is being talked about at the Capitol. And last but not least, we have a diversion program that we partner with the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office and provide survivor support for those individuals who have been arrested on charges of prostitution, but many of us know that those situations and stories are often trafficking. So next up, we have several announcements. I would like to welcome Miss Mandy Honey with Restore Innocence. Mandy, are you out there?
I am, yes. So I wanted to introduce the fact that we are going to start looking at a new mentor training. We have some new mentees coming into our program, and we need to have some more willing mentors to come alongside of them. So if you are feeling at all called to mentor or know someone who would be a great mentor, please contact me. This is all my information, my phone number, my email, best way to contact me. So just like it says here, if you feel like you are a caring, dependable, and supportive person, or you are a trusted source of guidance and encouragement, just contact me. You can also go onto our website, restoreinnocence.org, and there is an application to apply for becoming a new mentor.
So thanks, Mandy.
Yeah, and oh, one more thing. We are still firming up the date, but it probably would be in August, we think.
Okay, great. Just keep us posted and we can put that on our website too so that people can find it. Or you can go to Restore Innocence's website to find that information as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
Next, I'm not sure that I saw Mike de Betancourt's name on the participants list. Mike, are you here?
He's not.
He is not here. Okay, so we're going to skip past that because I don't have his information. Kendall Berger, are you here with Sheltered Alliance to talk about your upcoming conference?
Yes, thanks, Julie. My name's Kendall. I'm the membership manager for the National Trafficking Sheltered Alliance, and I'm located a little bit up north in the Fort Collins, Loveland area, so I would love to stay on with the streaming virtual every month. So thanks, Julie, and everybody. We are hosting our annual Sheltered Conference this upcoming October, the 19th to the 21st, and it will be virtual. We have 3 full days packed with live presentations as well as shorter presentations that are pre-recorded because we know y'all are so busy on the ground serving survivors all day, every day. So we have a lot of presentations that you can watch on your own time. And so I would love to invite y'all to join us this October. Registration is $124 per person, but we also have a group rate. I will throw all of that in the chat, and I just ask you to spread the word, join us. This conference is really geared for any individual who is committed to learning more about this field, as well as care, different program models, trauma-informed care. We have amazing experts. We have Bridge Hope presenting as well, and we are really excited. So feel free to send me a chat with any questions, and thanks again, Julie.
Yeah, thanks for being with us, Kendall. And this virtual format that we had to switch to because of COVID is the reason that we were able to connect with Kendall. So I just think it's amazing that we've made these connections at a time in life when connections seemed very lacking. So I'm glad that you've been with us for so long, Kendall. Next, we have Barb Henderson to share with us about some things that Bridge Hope has going on. Barb?
Hello, thank you so much. Glad to be here. First, I didn't put this in the announcements, but the first thing I want to say is we had a very successful gala, our very first one, May 8th. And some of you might have attended or queued into it. Sean Wheeler, who I see is in our meeting tonight, he was one of our speakers and he did great. If you are not on our newsletter list, our newsletter that went out today at 10:15 has information about the speakers and some good links. So if you're not on our newsletter list, you can email me at barb@bridgehopenow.org. I want to let you know that we are continuing our free monthly webinars, even though things are opening up. We're going to do monthly webinars online because we're reaching people across the country and sometimes out of the country. On June 30th at 6 p.m., we have a really great guest speaker, Kimberly Kocherans. She's speaking on navigating the lasting effects of complex trauma with compassionate trauma-informed care. She's president and founder of the Healing Center for Complex Trauma. And July 28th, our webinar will be on familial trafficking. So those are 2 webinars you might want to put on your calendar if you're in town, and if you're able to do those at 6 p.m. to 6 to 7 p.m. And we are gearing up for a Christmas and July fundraiser because we're trying to raise all of our funds for the Give Hope holiday package that we send out in December. So those are our main announcements. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one quick question about the Christmas thing that you have.
Yes.
Are you wanting like just money or gift cards, or is there specific things that people can send in, or do you have a list that people can access?
Oh, good question. Thank you so, so much. What we do is we are soliciting some different companies specifically for fair trade items, and we already have some things donated. We are looking for funds to be able to purchase some things at wholesale. A lot of companies are saying last year hit them hard and they're not able to donate like they would have in the past. But we're sometimes able to purchase things at wholesale, like fair trade teas, fair trade chocolates, the shampoo bars that are without the bottle. So a lot of these are really neat products, and we're getting really good prices for the quoted to us for the wholesale. So funds would be really great. And anyone can donate at our website, bridgehopenow.org. And I will put those links in the chat for both the upcoming webinar and how to email me.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you, Barb.
Sure, thank you.
Our last announcement I'm pretty excited about. We have Beth Ritchie here with us from BV Hope to share with us about their new initiative, Haven for Hope. Beth?
Good evening, everybody. It's so good to see everybody and to be able to make this announcement as well. BV Hope has been around since 2014, and we've always focused on education and awareness. And we are stepping out to expand that to more of survivor care. And we are starting fundraising to opening a survivor home. Much like the Paquita Mountain Home, it's going to be based on Thistle Farms model, a 2-year program for adult women of human trafficking surviving. And we're really excited to get going. We're just starting looking for donations. We'd love someone to donate a home. That would be great. And so we're just getting going and getting the word out to everyone, and then our community is being very supportive of it. So we're excited to get started on this new program.
That's amazing, Beth. Do you have a website up and running with like items that you need donated?
It's our regular website, bvhope.org, and there's a special tab for Haven for Hope. And at this point, we haven't started that yet, but we are setting up like a virtual auction for this fall. And so we would need things donated for that, so we could do a virtual auction.
Oh, cool. That's a great idea. I'm
Thank
so
you
glad
so
that
much.
your community is coming around you. That's a really important part of having a home for survivors, is having community buy-in. And that's
Right.
great.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you guys. Okay, so we're going to transition into our 5 minutes of networking time. Over the next couple of slides, you'll see the organizations that are represented here and the names of the people who registered. I don't know if all of them actually logged in, but we're going to take the next 5 minutes. Please use this time to connect with one another in the chat. Again, please stay muted so that we can keep things running smoothly, but use this time to connect, ask questions, share emails, and do all of that kind of stuff. So we have about 5 minutes before I introduce our speaker. We have about 1 more minute, so go ahead and wrap up those conversations. And just one quick reminder, when our speaker does come on, if you have questions, please send a private message to the host with that question, and she will gather them so that we can present them to our speaker when his presentation is complete. All right. I have to say that I'm pretty excited about our speaker this evening. For quite a while, we have talked about the need to find ways to see and tackle labor trafficking here in Colorado Springs and throughout Southern Colorado, yet it has eluded us. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from someone who has experience engaging with the issue of labor trafficking right here in Colorado. Tom Acker, a founding member of the Western Slope, is a founding member of the Western Slope Against Trafficking. He has worked for more than a decade on the issue of immigrant integration and civil rights, which evolved into exploring the plight of H-2A visa workers in the Western United States, especially sheep herders. He is a member of the Colorado Human Trafficking Council and serves with the State Advisory Board Human Trafficking Project. Tom is a past board member of the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition and currently serves as board president of the Hispanic Affairs Project. Tom is on the board of directors for the Grand Valley Peace and Justice and on the Human Development Commission of the Catholic Diocese of Pueblo. He is a professor of Spanish at Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction. Tom, thank you for joining us this evening. I know we had hoped for you to be with us in person so that we could connect you with some people that we're interested in working with down here, but I do hope that we can get you down this way at some point in the near future. Welcome and thanks for presenting this evening.
Thank you, Julie. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just listening to the presentations and the conversations that you were all having and sharing your projects and your programs, I was very impressed with the amount of energy that you all have and the coordination that you've demonstrated. I really, at times when I travel around the state of Colorado, I'm always reminded of, our state is probably bigger than a lot of countries, and the variety of activities and what people are doing is always awe-inspiring. Julie asked me to talk to you tonight about labor trafficking, and I definitely will be doing that. But my orientation is a little bit different in that I'm a believer in collaborations, and I have benefited from collaborations. And you'll see in my presentation, I talk a lot about different collaborations we've had. The organization Western Slope Against Trafficking started back in 2013. We all have our mission statements. They evolve, resources appear or we hunt them up, and they enable us to change according to the needs around us. You know as well as I, one conversation can completely change the way you interpret reality based on what that survivor may be needing or what his experience or her experience has been. So, the 4 Ps, I'm imagining many of you are familiar with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking and the way that, we want to prevent human trafficking through forming partnerships and preventing and enabling prosecution. And really, I think the role of most of or many of our community organizations, ours, WASAT in particular, is to inform the larger community about the realities of human trafficking. And in order for that to happen, we have to be informed ourselves. And So our mission statement, as you can see, is reducing and preventing human trafficking through outreach partnerships with key community organizations. So what are key community organizations? We were just talking in the beginning here with Joey and Julie and Wendy. We were talking about the access to schools. And we know, in fact, that oftentimes it is not easy to get into schools. The structures of our communities oftentimes are not easy to navigate. And you have to have a certain credential in order to get into certain places. And in fact, I would argue this is doing a disservice to our communities, but it's part of the reality. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that, especially in regards to labor trafficking, because unlike sex trafficking, labor trafficking is something that is a labor-saving device. It is not a labor-saving, I should say, an overhead reduction. It is a means of keeping your labor costs down. And so oftentimes people that might be participating in labor trafficking could be businessmen and women in our communities with Chamber of Commerce credibility. And in fact, in the United States, where we have many undocumented workers and people living in our communities, these are the vulnerable ones in our communities, and these are the people that are often victimized. So I'm going to be talking about labor trafficking today, and I want us to envision it as a continuum. If we look at labor trafficking, we could say, well, let's see, do you work in an organization where you sit on you're a worker, but you sit on the board with the governing board of that organization? Do you have a vote in labor practices and policies in that company? That's one extreme of the continuum. And then as we move into the middle of the continuum, we'll see that perhaps you're an employee and you earn a wage, but you don't have any say in what goes on in the company you work for. It's a top-down model. And so in that place, you're moving into a less access to a democratic process in that organization. And if we keep moving to the left, I'll use the left if we're going along a line, and you get to a place where you may have your wages withheld because you've spoken up and complained about something, or you're being forced to live in certain housing that you're being charged to live in it. And as you see, we're getting to the point where when we have force and coercion and threats of violence and no salaries being paid, then that's the extreme of labor trafficking that we're talking about. So I want us to think of labor trafficking as an extreme end of a continuum. So how did I get involved in the issue of labor trafficking, and why? We all know that human trafficking occurs because people are victimized. Why are they victimized? They're victimized because they are marginalized. They have no power. I would argue that many of the victims of sex trafficking are oftentimes young people that got into the system. They may be were taken into a home. The state may have assigned them to be living in a home because their houses, their birth families were not appropriate settings. They had been sexually abused, etc. So marginalized people are victims of trafficking. And in the case of labor trafficking, what we're often seeing are people coming to the United States, many times foreigners, but we need to recognize, of course, that it's not only foreigners. We also need to recognize that it's not only labor trafficking, it could also be sex trafficking. If any of you are familiar with the documentary Rape in the Fields, where women talk about having been raped in agricultural fields. And that's a phenomenon that occurs in our country as well, and not only our country, of course. So where I got involved here is initially I was involved with immigrant rights, and we were participating in 2006 with a movement here in Grand Junction on the Western Slope, Delta, Montrose, as far south as Gunnison. We involved organizations that were affiliated with the Catholic Church. The organization that I'm currently the board president of in those days was called Hispanic Affairs Pastoral Project, and we were under the auspices of the Catholic Church. We became a member of Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. There was some friction about how funds were going to be raised. Grantors didn't feel that the religious connection would be appropriate for what they were trying to see happen. And so we divorced ourselves from the Catholic Church, and we are now Hispanic Affairs Project. So we're working with a marginalized sector of the community. And specifically in my experience, I was invited by an immigrant from Chile who had worked as a range worker being a person that works out on the open range. It may be with sheep, it may be with cattle, it may be with goats. Typically, those are the animals that they work with. And he invited me to go and visit range workers because he was visiting former friends. And at that time, 2006, we were opposing certain legislation. And this is something else I will point out, that in my collaborations, we feel that legislation and the laws that we're living under may be conducive to abuses, and they need to be addressed. And we can talk more about that in a minute. But part of what we were looking at in this particular juncture was changing a law in Colorado that was imitating an Arizona bill that was called Show Me Your Papers, in which the law enforcement community was acting as immigration officials. And we worked to get that legislation changed. So that was part of what the Hispanic Affairs Project was born out of. And then we started to fund visits to range workers. And part of those visits had to do with a survey we were conducting under Colorado Legal Services to find out what is going on in the range workers' world, in their remote existence out up in the mountains in the summertime, in the deserts in the wintertime, and on ranches in other parts of the year. So after getting that experience and those insights, I began to work with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking. I'm assuming you're all familiar with them, but their training and participation with them led to the establishment and the founding of Western Slope Against Trafficking. So that was in 2013. And then there was a legislative mandate, House Bill 14-1273, which established the Colorado Human Trafficking Council. And I was invited by Hickenlooper to sit on that as a member of a rural initiative. And because of my experience looking at labor abuses. And so that council was formed in 2015. So, and I apologize for the dense text, and I told Joey I would be glad to share this with you if you're interested. But I just wanted to point to subsequent events in the anti-trafficking movement. So pressure through activism and litigation at the federal level, and this is in regards to the range workers specifically, we were able to pressure the Department of Labor to change the monthly wages of a sheep herder from $700 a month to $1,500 a month. And that was, one of the most important things. And why did we choose that in spite of all the other issues that we felt needed to be addressed? Because that's what the workers told us they wanted. That is why we decided we would focus on that. They wanted better pay. So right now we're working with an organization, a pro bono legal firm, Towards Justice, and they were in part responsible for pressuring the Department of Labor to change the salary scale for those workers. And the lawyers in Towards Justice are representing Hispanic Affairs Project and several herders. We are the plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit alleging that ranchers across the United States, the Western United States, colluded to depress shepherd wages illegally. They deducted expenses from their meager paychecks, and they misled state and federal governments in a pattern of racketeering activity. The herders allege that ranchers hired their shepherds through an association, the Western Range Association, which was constituted by competing ranches. In so doing, they sharply limited competition for shepherds and effectively fixed wages at a minimum allowable by law. So what we are looking at is a combination of things. Just like the sex trafficking the sex trafficking activism that you all are doing and I am also doing, we need to be informed by victims. We need to be informed by survivors. And unless we do that, we all know that our activities will be pretty fruitless. So that is what we've been focusing on these several years that we've been looking at this. Through the Labor Trafficking Task Force of the Colorado Human Trafficking Council, and that I was on that task force, the Colorado legislature was encouraged to recognize wage theft as a felony. Previously, it was just something that was kind of a slap on the wrist, but now as a felony, if you are withholding wages illegally of more than $2,000, the law adds refusing to pay those wages or compensation with intent to coerce the person, and that is a felony now. So those types of changes I think are important if we want to improve the welfare of the marginalized people in our community, which are the victims. So we need to identify what the sources of poverty are, what the sources of marginalization are, and then we need to collaborate with groups, including conversations with the victims themselves, the survivors, and also with legal minds that can help us access the State House and push for legislative changes. That's part of the role of the Colorado Human Trafficking Council too, is researching through different means what is going on in the human trafficking world and what legislation can be implemented to make that situation go away. In 2013, following my narrative about our evolution, Colorado Legal Services and Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking, we came together at Colorado Mesa University, and we hosted about 70 Western Slope community members, which included law enforcement, human services, civic organizations, and others, to get informed, have a training about labor trafficking and other forms of trafficking. So at that point in WSAT, Western Slope Against Trafficking, we enjoyed the support of various disciplines at the university community, including criminal justice, social work, Spanish, healthcare, and others. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we've evolved, we've changed. We have social work faculty members participating with Western Slope Against Trafficking and others as well. We continue to do outreach to the agricultural workers through grants that we had from Colorado Legal Services Migrant Outreach or Migrant Agriculture Division. We had a human trafficking grant through Hispanic Affairs Project that enabled us to go out and do outreach up in Routt County, up in Bonanza, up in Rangeley, other areas where sheep herders in different moments in the year are running their sheep, and getting informed, staying in touch with them, informing them about what services are available to them, providing them with access to lawyers, etc. So over these many years, we've traveled thousands of miles, literally, all throughout Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming to visit these workers. So there's no formal statistics, and this is out of overworked and underpaid. The document that was the product of a survey of 90 workers in Colorado So while there's no formal statistics on the number of H-2A herders in the United States, and let me just clarify, H-2A is a federal program to bring in temporary workers, and those are the workers that you'll see in the fields. You'll see them doing the harvest in orchards, in the cornfields, etc. But we argue, Hispanic Affairs does, as a plaintiff, that it's an inappropriate use to have sheep herders brought in with those temporary visas when in fact they're given 3-year contracts. So in our survey, what we learned was almost 73% of the herders reported having 0 days off over the course of a year. More than 80% were not permitted to leave their ranch. Approximately 35% were paid less than once a month. 85% were not allowed to have visitors who were not ranch employees. Roughly 70% reported never having access to a functioning toilet. 85% were never permitted to engage in social activities, and almost 50% reported not having the opportunity or ability to read their employment contract. So if we look at many of the aspects of this labor condition, we have to recognize that there is a huge need for change in the legislation that permits this type of visa and this type of treatment of workers to exist. And so this is part of what we're working on in the labor trafficking. So I'm going to share with you some pictures of outreaches we've done. This is in Sapinero up in northwestern Colorado. Reynaldo, Heraclio, Ramiro are all Bolivian H-2A workers. They've since left and are working independent. They're not H-2A workers. In fact, the Bolivian government outlawed, or I shouldn't say outlawed, but they prohibited H-2A visa workers to come to the United States from Bolivia because they felt that they were being abused. One of the workers that we interviewed is Eumetio, and forgive me, Eutemio. This is back in 2012. But during her visit, a Spanish-speaking psychologist said that all of these men are severely depressed after she interviewed and visited with them. I'll point out, notice the demeanor of the gentlemen when they're able to gather and work together, and notice the demeanor of people that are isolated. It's not unfair, or it's not fair to think that because you're from a foreign culture that you can withstand this sort of psychological duress. In fact, in interviewing the director of a Catholic organization down in Chile when we traveled there, Funda, he told me that of 10 herders, Chileno herders that returned to Chile, only one of them was able to benefit from his experience and invest and pay for his kids to go to college, etc., which is one of the arguments the ranchers will often say. But he said the other 9, many of them have substance abuse. They come back with post-traumatic stress syndrome. They have alcohol issues, and many of them get divorced, and their children, in fact, become wards of the state. So some of the notes that I wrote, and I just wanted to share with you, are from interviews that I did with workers that demonstrate the imbalance that the government and the DOL H-2A visa program creates. So in 2013, I visited with this gentleman. The ranch recently was sold to a large ranch familiar to the Western Slope. He was fired from the ranch just before that sale for complaining about the treatment of his uncle, Alex, and he received at the rancher's hand. Chilenos in the mountain region are indigenous people. They live in clans called Ayu, and their extended families have a social fabric that really requires them to stand up for each other. It also plays out that they reach out to family members to get them hooked up on ranches in the United States. But in this case, this group of workers tried to help Alex, who suffered from an eye condition, and they complained to the rancher that he needed help and medical attention, and the rancher ended up firing them. So this gentleman was charged the cost of airfare and told to return to Peru. The rancher withheld his pay, accusing him of not completing the contract. He is currently on a cattle ranch in Utah. And of course, this is back in 2013. I also have narrative of working as an interpreter, going into a healthcare setting. And you all know the HIPAA requirements that you can't have strangers in an examining room in a hospital setting. There needs to be permission. For whatever reason, oftentimes healthcare workers allow supervisors from ranches and farms to come in and act as interpreters with the workers. And this, of course, would not be permitted if these were white people, I will argue. Why is it being permitted? Because they're H-2A workers that speak other languages. We have interpreters available, etc. And so this gentleman suffered that particular. And all too typical labor abuse is the inability to resolve their problems. And so the same group that I was talking about, all were finally fired and made to go illegal, ir al pueblo, as they say. And so they got jobs in construction. They're living precariously. I have tried to maintain contact with them, and they have been out of touch with their family for many, many years. So in the time that they have been working on ranches, it's a dangerous occupation. They receive injuries. In this particular case, this gentleman had his finger partially amputated. I know other workers that have had similar injuries, and they're told they need to continue working. They're given a perfunctory visit to an emergency ward. They get stitched up or patched up in sort of a way, but they're never given time off to really heal. This is an all too common phenomenon among these workers. So what I want to share at the end of this with you is good news. Julie was asking or mentioned earlier that she was not following the legislation. The legislation that I'll ask us to follow is House Bill 2187, and this is called the Agricultural Workers' Bill of Rights. What does this, it actually is waiting for the governor's signature. It was passed. So it removes the exemption of agricultural labor from state and local minimum wage laws. Previously, it was not required that workers in agriculture will be paid minimum wage. It requires that the director of the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics promulgate rules to establish overtime pay for agricultural employees for hours worked in excess of 40 a week or 12 hours a day. It grants agricultural employees meal breaks and rest periods, and you may be surprised to hear that those were not available to them previous to this legislation. It requires agricultural employers to provide agricultural employees with access to transportation to key service providers. It authorizes agricultural employees to have visitors at employee-provided housing. Previously, as a member of Hispanic Affairs Project and conducting these surveys, I was often prevented from visiting workers, sometimes threatened, but now with this change in the law, that's no longer going to be allowed. It requires agricultural employers to provide overwork and health protections to agricultural employees, like sitting in the shade, breaks in hot weather, access to cool water, etc. Prohibits the use of a short-handled hoe. These are some of the things that are going to be provided in this new legislation. And most importantly, or one of the very important things, it creates an agricultural worker advisory committee to study and analyze agricultural wages. And it creates rights and remedies for agricultural employees that feel that they have been abused. So even though this is really good legislation, it was very polemic. There was a lot of pushback. We were with a number of organizations that pushed for this legislation. There needs to be further steps taken. So further steps that need to be taken to address labor exploitation that is occurring through poor policies and lack of legislation that would address these inequities and empower currently marginalized individuals. So currently, towards justice. The Denver Pro Bono Liga team is negotiating some of the following issues. They are negotiating H-2A visa program, the United States Custom and Immigration Service and the Department of Labor. They need to change this program and apply it only to certain areas, temporary workers coming in. It should not be applied to workers like range workers that are working all year long. They, on the other hand, should be provided access to permanent residence so that they can change employers if they choose. And as long as they agree to work in agriculture in the field that they came here on this special visa, they should be allowed to work under those new conditions. Some other things one thing that workers have definitely mentioned to us that we feel needs to be implemented is something called totalization. And all this is the ability to contribute to Social Security retirement fund in your country of origin when you are working in the United States. It's something workers have asked, and it's something that Chile has with the United States. We have it with European countries, at least Western European countries. We need to implement this with Mexican workers and Peruvian workers and others that are here on temporary visas. So that's the content, and I really apologize for kind of running through all this so quickly, and I'd be more than happy to share this PowerPoint with folks. And if we still have time for questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we do have some time. Wendy, are you the one that's going to be giving us the questions? Oh, somebody needs to unmute Wendy.
Got it. We're working on it.
Okay.
God bless technical people.
That's right.
I can read it if you'd like, Julie. This is Teresa.
Okay.
Tom, do you know anything about Taylor Farms? They require 48-hour work weeks. Will the new law apply to them?
Are we talking about a range working organization? Is this a cattle or sheep? I'm not familiar with them. Can you tell me more?
Okay, I will write her and see if she can give us more information. We had another question. Are these ranches corporate?
They're LLCs in most cases. As a matter of fact, I think they're all LLCs. Is that answering your question? So they're not corporations.
So more like most often family-owned businesses.
Yes,
probably.
yes. In many cases, although when we say family-owned, there are ranches that they're family-owned, but they're very wealthy, and they hire many workers. So family-owned evokes a certain perception, but we need to understand that these are multi-million-dollar operations sometimes.
Tom, to the first question, she did write more information. So this is the Taylor Farm. She says it's a packing plant. She said workers put salads together, etc., in a large factory.
Right. I am not familiar with them, but a packing plant is a slightly different operation. There's laws and all over the place, but from my understanding, if you're packing your own produce, then you fit into one category. If you're packing other people's produce, then you're a packing plant. And so that would impact. If the people are working 48 hours, this new legislation would allow them to work up to 40 hours. And after that, this is something that's going to be worked with the rules making committee. I'm not one of the lawyers that wrote this legislation. I'll just point out, but there is a reason for overtime, and the reason for overtime is to provide adequate staffing in businesses. And so if you have adequate staffing, you don't need to pay time and a half. But it's a means of not exploiting workers and making them work hours extra, especially under certain conditions where it can be very dangerous. If you're tired, if it's very hot, or if you're unfamiliar with the equipment. The gentleman whose finger was severed that I was telling you about earlier, well, it wasn't actually him, it was another gentleman, but he was asked to use a baling machine, which he'd never used before, and he got caught in it, and he lost use of 3 fingers, and it was very tragic because he was a musician back in Peru. So these are some of the reasons you want to have limited amount of hours for this very physical activity.
Teresa, did you see those other questions? I can read them if not.
Wendy's unmuted now too.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
There is one question. How many, is there an estimate of how many H-2A workers there are in Colorado? Is there a limit on how many of those visas are handed out, or how does all of that even work?
There is a limit to how many are handed out. The amount of H-2A visa workers that work in the range sector, it's guesstimated, if you saw the slide I pointed out to earlier, to be about 300. When we did our interview, the survey we did with that group, we were able to interview 90 workers. So that's a large segment. In terms of H-2A visa workers in other sectors, grapes, orchards, cornfields, etc. I've heard upwards of 60,000, but that's in the United States. And I would love to be able to confirm the numbers. I know that we have, right now, I'm not going to give you a figure. I can look that up for you though, but I don't have the numbers right here.
Yeah, that's a curious question. I grew up in Southwest Kansas where there's a lot of farming, and I grew up with migrant workers and had no idea about any of the visa kind of.
For some reason, 60,000 and 40,000 comes to mind. And when I checked that a number of weeks ago, I was surprised that may be the number that come into Colorado, but I'm not 100% sure there.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. And a question came in: what kind of support for equitable treatment of workers do you or they receive from the interest promoting free and unrestricted U.S. border passage and immigration?
Repeat the question again, please.
Okay, it's what kind of treatment do workers receive from interest promoting free and unrestricted U.S. border passage and immigration?
Well, the workers that I'm describing, the H-2A workers, are all government sanctioned visas. There's nobody coming over illegally in that group. We do have undocumented workers living in the United States that are working, and many of them are doing their darndest to see if they can get their paperwork in order. It's not an easy thing. It's an expensive process. As far as open borders, you've got smugglers that bring workers in, and you've got workers paying to be smuggled. And I will point out, there's a difference between human trafficking and smuggling. Smuggling is a service that you provide. Human trafficking is where you victimize the person. And so if we're talking about smugglers, well, that's part of the narco business. And they're the same guys that are buying US weapons that are causing the death toll to rise, as well as sending narcotics into our country. They're the same ones that are working, smuggling people aboard. And I'll point out, one of the reasons that we have these famous caravans is because people just said, I'm not going to pay $5,000. Plus, I don't want to get victimized by the smugglers, which are often in cahoots with the narco business. And so people, Honduras, El Salvador, mostly Honduras, it seems, are using that as a means to get up to the border. We're not talking about open borders. I never said that, and I don't know really where that's coming from in this conversation.
There's a follow-up question that says, are these workers eligible for government assistance, like food and medical assistance? I'm not sure if that means the H2 workers or the illegal.
H2, any worker that is employed in a business is eligible to receive workman's comp if he gets injured on the job. But one of the things that happens is, you know, you're out, and I'm going to speak mostly about the sheep herders because those are the ones I'm most familiar with, although I do have some experience with other workers. But you get sick. I mean, you get a bad cold, you get pneumonia. One guy that got such bad pneumonia, they sent him back to Peru and he ended up dying because he fell off his horse and got caught in a snowbank and nearly froze to death. So if you get, and that was a workman's comp situation. But if you just get a bad cold, or another worker I know, for example, is right now getting operated on, well, it's a urinary issue for older gentlemen. That's not going to be covered by the US government or anybody. He has to go and pay for that himself, even though he's here in the country legally with a visa. But there is no health care for these people. And they're always asking me, what can I do for healthcare? I don't have any healthcare. Under Obamacare, there was some talk about that. They had to pay income tax for the first time because their salaries came up to $1,500 a month. And there's all sorts of kind of adjustments going on, as I understand it. And once again, I'm referring specifically to sheep herders. Other workers in other sectors of agriculture, I can't speak with much authority to their situation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, or maybe just lack of knowledge of what labor exploitation is and what it looks like here. And then, you know, you get into those political issues of open borders or not. But what do you feel like or what are some of the bigger things that we need to start understanding as a community about labor exploitation and labor trafficking? And on top of that, what can we start doing here in Colorado Springs to bring better awareness of these issues to our community?
Well, number one, I would say, remember the continuum I tried to present where, you know, you're given authority and you sit on the board with the president of the company, and then this continuum, and all of a sudden you're in a McDonald's where you don't have any authority. And then one of the things that's happening in our country and in Colorado and in my community in Grand Junction is there are sectors of the economy that use undocumented workers. They may pay them under the table. It's a symbiotic relationship. The workers are benefiting from working with a company and getting a salary, and they're not paying taxes. The company is kind of flying under the radar too, even though it's a very well-known company in my community. I can tell you, and this may shock some people, but the Colorado Mesa University may have benefited from some contractors. And this is another thing that we're asking to look at. The contractors should have a license to be a contractor. And to have a license, you need to be vetted. Unfortunately, right now, we have this plausible deniability where people say, hey, I didn't know he was undocumented. Hey, I didn't know they weren't getting paid because I didn't contract him. I hired this contractor to do it. And so all of these gray areas in our economy, our economy is humming. Construction is humming. But what's going on and who's being exploited and in what way are they being exploited? These are the things that we need to ask.
So I have a follow-up question, and I'm not sure. this is talking about the open borders again, or open borders or not. Do we have federal interests fighting for equitable treatment of these workers?
Okay, federal interests fighting. Well, if we're talking about federal interests, we could say we have certain legislators that are pushing for this equitable treatment. I would say some of the enforcement agencies, they're doing their duty of trying to keep the borders closed, et cetera. So in terms of equitable, I would say there needs to be more of a push on the part of the constituents to see that there's an equitable treatment of these workers. And, you know, one of the things that happened that I think we need to make very clear here, the sheep herders that were getting paid $700, they were given a carve out that the industry pushed for so that they would be paid less. Now, how did that affect American workers? Well, the industry pushed to have lower salaries and have a special, you know, giveaway that they could bring these workers in from abroad. But what American worker is going to work for $700 a month, or even $1,500 a month? In fact, if you do the numbers, $22,000 is still $4,000 under the poverty rate for a family of four. And many of these workers that are working right now on ranches are working under the poverty rate. But you know, the industry is calling the shots and they're pushing back. And so if you want to ask, why are American workers suffering? I think we need to look closely at how industry is benefiting. It's part of, it's a complex mix.
It is. Do we have any more questions? I know I feel like Joey and I have been chatting and we're like, I feel like I need to study some of your slides and stuff to come up with better questions so we know we understand the issue. This is just so new to our group talking about these things. It's like so much to learn.
I know it's very complex, and I think it's important that we begin to get informed about it, because we're hearing a lot of one side of an issue, but we're not hearing the whole picture. And I think we really need to get informed. And, you know, you all can tell I've got my agenda. I'm not going to pretend I don't. I've been working with worker rights since the 1980s. But I think if we are looking closely, the ag sector is going to benefit if we look at the consolidation that's going on, the monopolies that exist, that you got one packing plant for all of Colorado, or it's all owned by JBS. Those sorts of things impact more, I would say, more harshly the agricultural sector than do an increase in wages for the workers. We need to look at big pictures, and it's something that our legislators need to be aware of, and that we need to express that we are concerned about this consolidation of processing and retail, et cetera. We really need to ask who's benefiting from these consolidations and who's suffering.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you feel like, since you sit on the Colorado Human Trafficking Council, do you feel like in the last couple of years, you guys have been able to get a grasp on good things to present to our legislators and to the governor? Yes,
I definitely do. Well, for example, the turning labor trafficking, or I should say wage theft, into a felony. Yeah. That's a product that came out of the task force, a task force of the council. Another one we're working on right now is, well, Jill Brogdon, I wanted to mention to you guys, we were talking earlier, Julie, about the legislation, and I wanted to just point out SB 21088. Google it. It's the Child Sexual Abuse Accountability Act. It ends a statute of limitations against who can be prosecuted for child sexual abuse. And that Jill Brogdon is the vice president of the council. And she is, or the vice chair, I guess we'll call her. And she was one of the most vocal, and she's also a survival. And she was one of the most vocal that worked on that. What else are we working on? We're also working very hard on, in one of the task forces, to reach out to survivors and bring in their voice into recommendations and changes. You all should be aware that there's a campaign that's going on to inform the state about human trafficking. Perhaps you've seen DIA, the airport is going to have it, and others. They're trying to make sure when they initiated the process to get this campaign off the ground, they interviewed survivors, and the survivors frankly said, you know what, you guys you fumbled it. You didn't do it. You didn't interview us in a sensitive, trauma-informed way. And so there was a lot of blowback. And so, well, I don't want to exaggerate. There was some blowback, but the council is working hard to make sure that we're hearing the voices and incorporating their perspective into policy recommendations. It's essential. It's essential.
Yeah, I agree. It really, really is. Any more questions?
I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Well, Tom, I'm so glad you were here with us this evening. Can you make sure that you put your, I haven't watched the chat. I don't know, maybe you already have put your email address in there so that people can reach out to you. I'm sure there will be lots of questions. Our task force has been, or our board members have been looking into what can we start doing here in Colorado Springs? Who do we need to engage in this issue? And we'll be looking more into that. So I know I'm going to have more questions for you, and I've already suggested some other people look you up as well. But I'm so appreciative for the years of work that you have put in looking at labor exploitation and fighting for workers' rights. And then bringing that to people like us who we don't know what it looks like. You know, you hear things in the news, you hear things out there, but we need to know what the truth is from all perspectives so that we can learn how to fight labor exploitation and labor trafficking through legislation and other means as well. I'm so appreciative that you were here to share with us this evening.
Sure. Hey, Julie, could I really just make one soundbite?
Yeah.
One of the things that we've discovered, or whatever, has been revealed to us, let's do it that way, is different ethnic groups will react very differently to human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And that if you talk to people and say, have you been trafficked? In Vietnamese, what you would ask them is, have you been sold? Language is an obstacle, but also people from different ethnic groups don't identify with surviving human trafficking. They identify with their cultural context. And I'm just mentioning because we really need to think how we talk to people.
Yes.
And when you guys are getting ready to do that, like you mentioned, going to the Hispanic church, you know, you can't come in and go, yeah, human trafficking. It's like, no, that's not going to fly.
Right. Yeah, the rules and mores that you have to follow in each culture
Yes.
are definitely something that has to be studied. And I think we look at and recognize that when we work with the women in massage parlors, when you understand
Yes.
Asian culture and even within what we call Asia, you know, different countries within that and how they view work and what they should or should not do. It's all different. It's definitely not an easy thing. And I think you haven't been to our group before, but I think people probably get tired of me saying like, this is not something that's easy to tackle. This is not something that we can just, you know, run right in and be like, I'm going to help people. This is going to be awesome. Like we've got to dig in and really do some research and work, or we could do more harm than we are able to help. So yes, I appreciate that encouragement. There's a lot of things that need to be understood. Thank you.
Yeah. I just really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all in this kind of weird Zoom world. And I congratulate you on all the good work you guys are doing. It just gives me chills, really. I'm inspired.
Well, thank you. We really have an awesome community down here. So Thanks so much
Good,
for being
good.
with us.
Keep it up. You guys are great.
Thanks. All right, everybody, we'll give you just a couple more minutes if you want to shoot out any last minute chats to connect with people. And at this point, we'll be on Zoom fully next month unless I hear from the church, and then we'll see if we can pull off a in-person live stream thing. You guys have always been so gracious to walk with us as we try to figure out what in the world we're doing. So I'm so appreciative that you spent your evening with us, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person next month.